Hi. Well, happy Thursday, everyone. This is Sarah, your friendly neighborhood prevention specialist. Since it's Thursday, that means this class is for freshmen through seniors. It is April 23rd already. Wow. Um, so today we're getting into kind of a heavy subject. We're going to talk about trafficking, and that's it's a heavy subject. We're going to talk about what it is, what the risk factors are. So I want you to get comfortable as possible. Today I'm in my Beyond Survival shirt, my work shirt, and some sweats. I'm nice and comfy. And because sometimes we have to have conversations that are uncomfortable but are necessary. And trafficking is one of those conversations that we need to have and that I have with classrooms, but it's uncomfortable. And I've had students talk to me and say, I don't like this. It makes my stomach hurt. Think about, this happening in my community. But we need to talk about it because it's important. And there are protective factors that you can take. So let's get right in. Let's get right into what trafficking is. Before I do that, this is what happens when you go live. Sometimes you forget stuff. So you can find all of the information that I'm going to give you on Google Classroom. You go to Google Classroom. It's free. You set up an account and you click Join Class. It's going to ask you for a code, and the code is G as in gorilla, 55M, Z as in zebra, WE. Okay, so now that we have that, you can print off all the material. Just like anything else that I've done with you guys, if you cannot print the material, it's okay. I'm going to go through all of it with you today. There are no activities, so there's nothing that you need a blank sheet of paper for. What you need are your ears, and that's pretty much it. Also, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, please drop them in the comments. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to get my notes, and I need my glasses because I can't see without them. All right, we're going to get into some frequently asked questions. Is child sex trafficking happening in the United States? Yes. It's called domestic minor sex trafficking, or DMST. It's the commercial sexual exploitation of children through buying, selling, or trading their sexual services. It is happening in the United States. Forms of domestic minor sex trafficking are not limited to prostitution, pornography, stripping, and other sexual acts. So when they say children, they mean anybody under the age of 18. So what is sex trafficking exactly? Sex trafficking is when a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, coercion, or when the person induced to perform the act is under 18 years old. A commercial sex act means any item of value that is traded for any sexual service, such as prostitution, pornography, or sexual performance. So this can be any item of value. It could be money, it could be drugs, it could be housing, clothing, food, anything that has any value at all. Domestic minor sex trafficking is the commercial sexual exploitation of American children within U.S. borders for monetary or other compensation. Like I said, shelter, food, drugs, anything, any kind of compensation. This is synonymous with child sex slavery, child sex trafficking, prostitution of children, and commercial sexual exploitation of children. This happens globally as well. Approximately 8 million children a year are sold into sex trafficking. That's a staggering number. And we'll get into the why in a little bit. So how about people who choose prostitution? Are they victims of sex trafficking too? So this question is asking about prostitutes, sex workers. Those two are synonymous words. Under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, sex trafficking requires force, fraud, coercion, unless the victim is a minor. So any minor used in a commercial sex act, the exchange of any item of value for a sex act, is a victim of trafficking, regardless of their willingness or desire to engage. Why don't victims escape when they have the opportunity? Gosh, we could do a whole class on this question alone. But we'll just get into kind of the basics here, and we'll get into a little bit more of it as we go. Traffickers and pimps use physical, emotional, and psychological abuse to coerce young people into a life of sex trafficking. Traffickers are masters of manipulation and employ tactics to create trauma bonds with their victims. Traffickers often use the threat of violence against victims or a victim's loved ones to secure their submission. So, and a trafficker or pimp can be a man or a woman. Many times, men will use women to lure or to help control some of the other prostitutes in their employ. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. How do traffickers or pimps recruit victims? Many pimps use a lover boy or a boyfriend technique. That's how those of us in the business typically refer to it, a lover boy or a boyfriend technique, to recruit girls from middle and high schools. This does not mean that boys are not sold into child sex slavery or that they're not trafficked, because they are. So a lover boy or a boyfriend will present himself as a boyfriend. They woo the girls with gifts, promises of fulfilled dreams, protection, adventure. Whatever she thinks she's lacking, he's going to provide that for her. He's going to convince her that he loves her and that he can provide for her. Typically, he's significantly older than she is, 10 or more years older, but that he can provide what she isn't getting at home. Traffickers use social media sites to recruit teenagers. After securing her love and loyalty, he will force her into prostitution. Again, we could go through a whole day just on that. How do they recruit and why don't they escape? But again, we'll get more into it. What makes a child vulnerable to child sex trafficking? So one is age. Age is a primary factor for vulnerability. Preteen and adolescent girls are more susceptible to the calculated advances, deception, and manipulation tactics used by traffickers or pimps. No youth is exempt from falling prey to these tactics. We like to think that we can't fall victim. We like to think our friends can't. We like to think that that happens to other people. It can happen to anybody, and we'll talk about why. Traffickers target locations where youth frequent, such as social media, schools, malls, parks, bus stops, shelters, and group homes. Runaway and homeless youth, as well as youth with a history of physical and sexual abuse, have an increased risk of being trafficked. Internet safety threats. Pimps are continually trolling the internet, posing as teen girl or boys in friendship. It's very easy to set up a profile and look and sound like someone our age, like someone your own age. This is very easy. My oldest fell victim, but obviously, nothing happened. We caught it early, but he was friended by someone who was like, "Oh yes, I'm definitely a 16-year-old girl. I live in Indiana." I could tell immediately that this was not true, but he couldn't. And we tend to be trusting as humans. So it's very, very easy to set up a profile. Just remember, if you don't know that person from school, if you don't know that person, don't give out any personal information. And don't give out, and not just personal information, but don't give out any secrets about yourself. Don't tell somebody something that you wouldn't want everybody to know. The relationship is developed without threat at first until the unsuspecting child agrees to meet with them or send compromising photos or shares a very deep secret or secrets. That's when the predator can move in and begin to separate them from their safety nets. It's very important for traffickers, pimps, predators to remove safety nets, and that can be the trusted adults in your life, school officials, people that basically look after you and care about you and don't want you to get hurt. So what's the difference between a trafficker and a pimp? Nothing. There's nothing. A pimp is just another name for a trafficker. A trafficker or a pimp is any person who causes an adult using force, fraud, or coercion, or any minor to engage in commercial sex in order to profit from the exploitation of that individual. Who buys sex? The buyers of sex from juveniles can be anyone: professionals, students, tourists, military personnel, family members, anybody. The demand is so high that that's why there's so many children sold into sex trafficking. That's why there is so much sex trafficking, is because the demand is so high. And it knows no race, it knows no education, it knows no socioeconomics, it knows no location. The buyers come from all walks of life. They come from all educational backgrounds. They come from all professional genres. There's just such a demand. In fact, it says tourists. There's even trafficking tourism that goes on. We've heard about people traveling like to Thailand and different places for trafficking, for sex trafficking purposes. It happens in the United States. Google sex trafficking and the Super Bowl or any other, or the Olympics. There's a tourism attachment to it, which is sick. How does pornography affect the trafficking industry? So many people think that the people that are in pornography want to be there, they're willing participants, and this is true sometimes. This is also not true sometimes. Viewing pornography may be a solo act. However, the production of the material and the social and relational consequences of the behavior extends far past the individual. Children and adults endure brutal rape and abuse at the hands of pornographers and may require years of specialized therapy to heal from the intense trauma inflicted on them. The effects of pornography can skew the viewer's personal relationship with a spouse or significant other. Trafficked women and children may face an increased risk of violence or degradation due to the normalization of deviant sex acts propagated through pornography. Pornography is not an accurate representation of sex. It is not an accurate representation of consent or desires. Many times people are forced into it. Many times people are underage. There's a whole lot, and again, we could cover this in a class, but just to realize that there's a whole incredibly seedy part of pornography where it's not people consenting and enjoying. But we're going to move on from that. What if someone I know is being groomed for trafficking or is being trafficked? So we're going to learn the signs to find out where to report. Okay, so the first handout on Google Classroom looks like this, and it talks about the booming industry that sex trafficking is. So this occurs when someone uses force, like we said, fraud or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or a minor to commit a commercial sex act. A commercial sex act, the definition includes prostitution, pornography, sexual performance, done in exchange for any item of value, such as money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothes. It thrives because there's a serious demand, a serious demand. So we see on this little chart, there's the buyer, there's the trafficker, and there's the victim. So the buyer fuels the market with their money. If there were not buyers, there would not be trafficking. The trafficker or pimp exploits victims to earn revenue from buyers, and the victim includes both boys and girls who are bought and sold for profit. Traffickers find victims through social networks, home neighborhoods, clubs or bars, internet, schools. They lure them with promises of protection, love, adventure, home, opportunity. You can make so much money. I'll put a roof over your head. I'll love you. We could do this together. You could be the wifey or the mom. A lot of times when traffickers or pimps, especially male traffickers or pimps, they choose one of the females in the group, and she's like the top. She's the top one. She's the one who helps control the other girls. And he refers to her as wifey, or they're the mom and dad. So it's this faux family unit. It's not a family unit. It's not what we would consider a healthy family unit. But for kids who lack family, who are looking for that family bond, that's what's promised. Traffickers use fear, violence, intimidation, threats. The common age a child enters sex trafficking is between 14 and 16. Too young, too naive to really realize what's happening, because we are typically trusting souls. And we just don't know that that's what's happening. And it's not the victim's fault. It's not the victim's fault that they didn't see it coming. It's not the victim's fault that they didn't know what was happening. They were being promised love. They were being groomed and manipulated by a master. Society may call it prostitution. Federal law calls it sex trafficking. Victims need help, not judgment, not punishment. Because of social stigma or misinformation, victims go largely unidentified, silenced by fear and the control of their trafficker or traffickers, and misidentified. A lot of times they're pigeonholed into treatment for surface issues, or they're arrested. It's very rare that the pimp or trafficker is arrested, and even rare that they're prosecuted. Typically, it's the prostitutes that get incarcerated time after time after time. So when you're racking up an arrest record like that, that's another thing that the trafficker or pimp has over them. How are you ever going to get a real job? Who's ever going to employ a hoe? Everybody knows you're a whore. Who's ever going to employ you? So that's another tactic. Sex trafficked children they're treated for drug abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic violence, delinquency, teenage pregnancy, STDs, abortion. What they need is to get out. What they need is help getting out of the life, to get away from the trafficker and back to their families or safe spaces for them. So warning signs. This is another one. It looks like this, that is on Google Classroom, that you can print off. Again, if you cannot print these off, we're going to go through it anyway. Warning signs that an individual is being trafficked. Signs of physical abuse, such as burn marks, bruises, or cuts. Unexplained absences from school, truancy. Less appropriately dressed than before. If somebody's style changes fairly drastically, then and it's something that is very skimpy, that's a sign. Sexualized behavior, overly tired or falls asleep in class, withdrawn, depressed, distracted, brags about making or having a lot of money. So if you see some of these other things and this person has money or is bragging about having money, that's a warning sign, especially when they didn't before. It displays expensive clothes, accessories, or shoes. This is usually in the very beginning because their trafficker or pimp is still in that boyfriend mode where they're like, I'm going to get you all these pretty things. Don't worry about a girl, I got you. I'm going to get you shoes. You can have this purse. Things that they didn't have before. New tattoos. This is a big one. Tattoos are often used by pimps as a way to brand victims. It's one of the ways that law enforcement uses to track victims of sex trafficking and who they're working for or who they have worked for. Because sometimes pimps will sell a victim to another pimp. A lot of times pimps are called daddies. So if you see a tattoo that says daddy or somebody's referring to their, to someone as daddy, that's why a lot of, we hear it in a lot of these terms, pimp, daddy, have been normalized in vocabulary for most people. And honestly, it's concerning. It shouldn't be normalized. Okay. So older boyfriends, new friends with a different lifestyle, gang affiliation, disjointed family connections, running away, living with friends, or experiencing homelessness. These are all warning signs. So pimps and traffickers often exhibit the following behaviors or characteristics: jealous, controlling, violent, significantly older than female companions, promising things that seem too good to be true. Again, I'll give you a home. We'll have all the money we need. I'll love you. I'll be your daddy. I'll be your boyfriend. All of those things. Encouraging victims to engage in illegal activities to achieve their goals and dreams, such as shoplifting, selling drugs, buying expensive gifts, or owning expensive items, especially if they're vague about his or her profession. If you're talking to somebody who drives a very nice car, who has very nice jewelry, who wears very nice clothes, and they can't tell you exactly what it is they do, that's a big warning sign. If they're pushy or demanding about sex, encouraging inappropriate sexual behavior, makes the victim feel responsible for his or her financial stability. So like, I put a roof over your head. I feed you. You owe me. These are debts that can never be repaid. You'll never, ever, the victim will never be able to repay. I put clothes on you. I feed you. Again, all of these things. So to report a tip or connect with anti-trafficking services in your area, there's Immigrations and Custom, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, National Human Trafficking Hotline, National Runaway Safe Line. You can look up all of these online. All right, so we have one more paper to go through, and this is the Power and Control Wheel. Now, this was adapted from the Domestic Violence. Again, when you go live, sometimes you make a mistake. The Domestic Abuse Intervention Project Duluth model. So this Power and Control Wheel has been around for quite some time, and it's used to explain domestic violence in ways that people, understand how it all ties in together. This was adapted for sex trafficking. So out here you have, on this part out here, you've got sex trafficking, prostitution, commercial, local trafficking, and then right here, it all comes down to power and control. And then we're going to talk about these things that are used inside of that to gain and keep the power and control. Using privilege. So they treat victims like a servant, using gender, age, nationality to suggest superiority. Uses certain victims to control others. So we talked before about like how there's the wifey or the mom. She's the top girl. And to control the others. hides or destroys important documents. A lot of times, victims won't have any ID. Their trafficker has taken that ID from them. They have gotten rid of it or sold it for identity theft purposes. So that victim can't prove that they are who they say they are. Physical abuse. This is a big one. Shoving, slapping, hitting, punching, kicking, strangling, burns, brands, tattoos, denying food or water, exposing to harmful chemicals, forces pregnancy termination. This includes drug addiction as a means of control. All of these are incredibly common. In fact, I have never heard of a case where those were not used. And sexual abuse. So sexual abuse is punishment or means of control. Forcing victims to have sex multiple times a day with strangers and sometimes with the trafficker. Treating a victim as an object for monetary gain. Normalizing sexual violence and selling sex. So we talked about this before when we talked about like victim blaming and consent. When you treat someone as an object, when someone is being treated as an object, that takes away their humanity. And it makes it easier for buyers to buy sex. Buyers like to fool themselves into thinking that these women or children are doing it because they want to, which typically is just not true, or that they enjoy it. Again, it's taking away someone's humanity. Denying, blaming, and minimizing. Makes light of abuse or exploitation, denies anything illegal or exploitative is occurring, places blame on the victim for the trafficking situation, or placing blame on the victim for the physical and sexual abuse. So, for example, if a girl or a boy didn't make enough money that day, they might get beaten. Well, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do because you didn't do what I told you to do, what you needed to do for the family. Isolation. This is a big one. Keeping victims confined, accompanying them to public places or to hotels, street corners, wherever it is that they're working. Creates distrust of police or others, saying, police aren't going to help you. They don't care about a whore. And they do. But when you're arrested over and over and seemingly nothing happens to your pimp, you get it in your head that they're right. Moves victims to different locations. We see this an awful lot. Doesn't allow victim to learn English or go to school. So this happens when immigrants are brought in or people are trafficked from other countries. Denies access to their children, to their family and friends. Many times when children go missing, if they're sold into sex trafficking, their parents, loved ones have no idea where they are. Emotional abuse. Humiliates in front of others, calls names, plays mind games, make the victim feel guilty or blame them for the situation, convinces the victim that they're the only one who cares about them. Remember, it goes back to that time when they were the boyfriend, the lover boy. I'm the only one who loves you. Nobody's going to love you, especially after this. That kind of stuff is very common. Intimidation. Harms other victims, children, or pets. They will take whatever it is that is important to the victim and destroy it to gain and continue to keep control. Displays or uses weapons, destroys property, lies about police involvement in trafficking situations. Again, it goes back to nobody's going to believe you. Coercion and threats. Threatens to harm the victim or family, threatens to expose or shame the victim, threatens to report police to police or immigration. This may seem counterintuitive, but knowing that, racking up that rap sheet again is going to make it harder. It makes it harder in the real world to gain employment and to go to school and things like that, to get housing, to have credit. So that's how they keep you in the life. Threatening or to expose or shame victims. So this happens a lot when we see LGBT victims, that I'm going to tell everybody that you're gay. I'm going to out you. That can be really horrifying, especially to a kid who has come from a situation that was where they were taught that it was not safe to be out. So that's another intimidation tactic. Economic abuse creates debt that can never be repaid. Takes money earned. A lot of times, these victims of sex trafficking see little to no money at all. Prohibits access to finances. Limits resources to a very small allowance. So you might have some shoes, some clothes. You're not going to have anything that really will help you get out on your own. So that is your power and control wheel. The reality of the issue is that sex trafficking happens everywhere, including Grays Harbor. Not just people that walk the street, but it happens all over Grays Harbor. And again, the buyers know they know no economic, socioeconomic barrier. It can be anybody, and it happens in Grays Harbor. So one of the things that you can do is trust your instinct. Trust your gut. I say this all the time. Trust your gut. Trust yourself. If you think something's wrong, it probably is. Get out. Seek help. Talk to a trusted adult. Seek out an advocate. Seek out a police officer. Talk to a parent, a grandparent, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, somebody. It's all of our job to be a good bystander, to be a good upstander, and to do the right thing when we see something is not quite right. Remember, you should always have at least 4 trusted adults to talk to. Excuse me. You should always have 4 trusted adults. And again, it doesn't really matter if it's a teacher, a counselor, an advocate, a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, an older sibling, cousin, whoever those trusted adults are. So now you have the choice. Now you know everyday situations that make us vulnerable for sex trafficking. If you have any questions more about this, please drop them in the comments. You can also email me at sarah@ghbeyondsurvival.com. sarah@ghbeyondsurvival.com. If you have any questions about trafficking, if you have any concerns, if you know of somebody being trafficked or you believe something's happening, call the police. Let them know. And again, trust your instincts. Always, always trust your gut. And if somebody friends you online that you don't know, don't give out any personal information. In the Google Classroom, there is a list of places that you can go online to get help or to learn more. You can print that off. If you can't print it, it's right there. You can write it down. But again, trust your gut. So now we know what it looks like. This was a really heavy class. So I'm going to go ahead and end it so that you can move on with your day. I suggest watching something that makes you laugh or reading a good book, going for a walk, something like that, because it's heavy. It's stuff that we want to think doesn't happen to people we know and doesn't happen in our community. And so when we find out, yeah, it does. It could be, you need to take a little time and process that. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Next Thursday, I will be back with you freshmen through seniors. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, whatever, drop them in the comments. Parents and educators, be sure to click that bell and subscribe so that you don't miss any new videos. And until I see you next time, I hope you have a great weekend. And remember, be kind and wash your hands. Bye.